So Zach Lowe said this about the Utah Jazz, and I agree with him. If the Jazz do not win 50 games this year, it's a disappointment, because Utah has made some additions this offseason, as well as a really impressive job of developing the young players they have on their roster to where they've built themselves a pretty deep and promising team here. If we look at the starting lineup going into the next season, there's George Hill, who was a big get for them this offseason. Now, I've said this before, but in a vacuum, the 12th pick in the draft for George Hill might be a little too much, but the draft is supposed to be relatively weak, and the Jazz, given their situation where they're ready to win right now, they really needed a point guard, and I think George Hill is the type of guard who can stretch the floor from three, make sure the offense is running correctly, as well as be a nice defensive player for you. He's not going to be someone who forces the issue too much as a point guard, but he's a very nice option at the lead guard spot to make sure everything's going well. He's not going to make too many mistakes for you. Rodney Hood has 20-point scoring potential, in my opinion, at the shooting guard position. And the best month he had for the Jazz last season, he put up about 19 points per game with over 40% from both three-point land and around 45% from the field. And his efficiency did wane towards the bottom as the season went along, but he had a lot of really good scoring moments for the Jazz last season, put up 15 points per game in total. I think he's only going to get better. He also has shown some ability as a defensive player. He's never going to be locked down, but he's pretty alright defensively. And he does have some ball handling abilities, so to have both George Hill and Rodney Hood, both of your guards who can dribble, that's really good. They both can shoot from outside. Gordon Hayward, another shooter for the Jazz. Their shooting is going to be pretty damn abundant this season with Hill, Hood, and Gordon Hayward. And the interesting thing is, all three of these guys can put the ball on the floor, which creates a lot of versatility for your team, having three guys who can dribble, play in the pick and roll, but also hit the outside shot. These three are going to be tough to defend. And one thing I'm interested in with Gordon Hayward is he's already shown flashes of being a decent off-ball player when it comes to cutting inside, because he's pretty damn strong, so he can finish inside, but also, coming around screens for jumpers and stuff. I think with George Hill as your point guard now, who can make some nice passes, I think you could see Hayward's off-ball game really take the next step, and that's only going to make their offense even better. Their front court, Derek Favors is a beast. He's physical as all hell. He's pretty much always around the basket, but he is one of the best finishers in the NBA when it comes to inside the paint. The question with Favors is, is he going to develop a 15-footer, and can he expand his offense a little bit more? But as of right now, Favors, post-up player, pick-and-roll player, can finish at the rim, and here's hoping he can progress a little bit more. And then Rudy Gobert, who is a monster defensively when it comes to defending the rim. He is a little vulnerable when it comes to his help defense and his pick-and-roll defense. I don't think he's average in those areas. I think he's pretty good in those areas, but he's not as good as, say, like a DeAndre Jordan when it comes to that, but he's still very good. Rudy Gobert, he makes them one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, and I think that starting lineup is really damn good. I mean, you got five guys who can play defense, including one of the best defensive players in the league in Rudy Gobert. George Hill, Rodney Hood, and Gordon Hayward can all shoot from outside, and they can put the ball on the floor. There's a lot of versatility, a lot of options in that starting lineup. But then when we go to the bench, we got Shelvin Mack, who was legitimately all right for them towards the end of last season. Dante Exum, who hasn't done too much in the NBA yet. Unfortunately, part of that is because of injury. Who knows what he'll be able to give you this early into his career, but if he can do something, that's awesome. Alec Burks has been a three-point shooter for them. They also acquired Joe Johnson, who was ridiculous for the Miami Heat in the last 20 games last season. The guy put up something stupid like 13 points, 50% from the field, and 40% from three. And that's not an exaggeration. He really put up those numbers for the Heat towards the end of last season. So you have Joe Johnson coming in to provide you with more offense once Rodney Hood or Gordon Hayward sit down. Hopefully Joe Johnson doesn't pull a Paul Pierce and just drops off a cliff in 1 year. I don't think he's going to. Alec Burks can be a shooter for you. They also have Boris Diaw, who can probably give you a solid 15 minutes per game with his passing and his three-point shooting, if he doesn't fall off a cliff too. The Jazz are just full of quality players, man. I mean, they were already a great defensive team, one of the best in the league. The problem was their offense, but now, with the acquisition of George Hill, who's going to make sure your offense is running correctly and be a three-point shooter, I think he's going to make Gordon Hayward and Rodney Hood better. Rodney Hood's just going to get better on his own because it's only his third season. Acquisition of Joe Johnson, I think the Jazz they're kind of loaded, man. So, I said in the beginning, if they don't win 50 games, it's a disappointment, and I'm sticking to that one. I think the Jazz are going to be a headache for a lot of teams in the Western Conference, and I think there's a very good chance they're going to end up with the number 4 seed or the 5th seed in the West. I think they're that good. And I think this is the year they finally make the jump.